The truth had a price Katherine Tanner never expected to pay, and on a scorching August morning in 1882, she found herself standing outside her father's ranch house with nothing but the clothes on her back and the weight of righteousness heavy on her shoulders. "Get off my land." Her father's voice cracked like a whip across the dusty yard, his face purple with rage. "You ungrateful girl. All I asked was one simple thing." Katherine turned to face him, her blue eyes dry despite the trembling in her hands. "You asked me to lie under oath, Papa. To say I saw Samuel Morrison steal those horses when I know it was you and Uncle Robert." The slap came fast, snapping her head to the side. Her younger brother, Thomas, stood frozen on the porch, his face pale. Their mother had died 3 years prior, and Katherine had run the household ever since, but even that loyalty counted for nothing now. "That Morrison boy had it coming," her father spat. "His family has been encroaching on our water rights for years. But you chose some abstract principle over your own flesh and blood. I chose what was right. Then you can find your own way in this world. You are no daughter of mine." He turned his back on her, slamming the door so hard the windows rattled. Katherine stood there for a moment, the Arizona sun beating down mercilessly on her dark hair. The Tanner ranch stretched for miles in every direction, cattle grazing in the distance, the mountains rising purple and distant on the horizon. This had been her whole life, these 22 years. Now it was gone. She walked. There was nothing else to do. The town of Oro Blanco lay 15 miles to the south, and she had no horse, no money, no supplies. Just her worn blue dress and her scuffed boots and the stubborn pride that had gotten her into this mess. By the time the sun reached its zenith, her throat was parched and her feet ached. The road stretched endlessly ahead, shimmering with heat. She had passed 2 wagons, but neither had stopped. Word traveled fast in this territory. Everyone knew what she had done by now, refusing to support her father's claim. The Tanners were powerful, and crossing them meant trouble. She was beginning to wonder if she would make it to town at all when she heard the sound of hoofbeats behind her. Katherine moved to the side of the road, expecting whoever it was to pass her by like the others. Instead, the horse slowed. "That is a long walk in this heat." The voice was deep and measured, with a slight drawl that spoke of Texas origins. Katherine looked up, shielding her eyes against the glare. The man on the horse was tall in the saddle, broad-shouldered, with dark hair that curled slightly beneath his worn hat. His eyes were the color of creek water, green-gray and watchful. A bandana hung loose around his neck, and his leather vest showed signs of hard use. He could not have been much older than 25 or 26. "I will manage," she said, though her voice came out rougher than she intended. He studied her for a moment, then swung down from his horse with easy grace. "Name is Grant Townsend, and you are Katherine Tanner unless I miss my guess." She stiffened. "Word travels fast." "It does." He pulled his canteen from his saddle and offered it to her. "Drink." Pride warred with thirst. Thirst won. Katherine took the canteen with shaking hands and drank deeply, the warm water tasting better than any wine. When she handed it back, he was watching her with an expression she could not quite read. "You did the right thing," he said quietly. Testifying truthfully. "You are the first person to say so. I doubt I will be the last." He gestured to his horse. "I am heading into Oro Blanco. You are welcome to ride. I have no money to pay you." Something that might have been a smile touched his lips. "Did I ask for any?" She hesitated, then accepted his hand up. He swung into the saddle behind her, his arms coming around her to hold the reins. Katherine tried not to notice the solid warmth of him at her back, or the way her heart had started beating faster. "Why are you helping me?" she asked as they started forward at an easy walk. If you know who I am, you know my father will not take kindly to it. Your father does not concern me." His voice was level, matter of fact. "I have worked as a ranch hand and a horse trader from here to Colorado, seen men like him before. Power goes to their heads, makes them think they are above the law. Someone needs to stand against that. Standing against it cost me everything." "Not everything. You still have yourself, your integrity." He paused. "Honesty is worth more than gold, Miss Tanner." "Might not seem like it right now, but it is." She absorbed those words in silence as they rode. The landscape rolled past, all dust and sage and scattered mesquite. The mountains seemed to shimmer in the heat, and overhead a hawk circled lazily. Despite her situation, Katherine felt something loosen in her chest. At least she was not alone anymore. "What will you do in town?" Grant asked after a while. "Find work, I suppose. I can cook and sew and keep accounts. Someone must need help." She felt rather than saw him nod. "The boarding house might have something. Mrs. Chen runs it, and she does not put much stock in gossip." Mrs. Chen came over from California after her husband died. Good woman. Fair. They reached Oro Blanco as the sun was beginning its descent toward the western hills. The town was small but bustling, a cluster of wooden buildings along a main street, with a church at one end and a saloon at the other. Grant guided his horse to a two-story building with a painted sign that read Chen's Boarding House. He helped Katherine down, his hands steady at her waist. For a moment they stood close together, and she caught the scent of leather and sage and something uniquely him. Then he stepped back, professional distance restored. "Come on. I will introduce you, Mrs." Chen was a compact woman with iron-gray hair pulled back in a severe bun and eyes that missed nothing. She looked Katherine up and down, then glanced at Grant. "What trouble are you bringing me, Townsend?" "No trouble. Miss Tanner here needs work and a place to stay." "Figured you might need help, what with the stage coming through 3 times a week now." Mrs. Chen pursed her lips. "I heard what happened. Whole town has heard." Katherine lifted her chin. "If that is a problem, did not say it was." The older woman's expression softened slightly. "Takes courage to tell the truth when it costs you. My husband was the same way. Got him killed eventually, but he died with his honor intact." She gestured toward the interior of the house. "I can offer room and board in exchange for help with cooking and cleaning. Wages to start in a month if you work out." Relief flooded through Katherine so suddenly her knees went weak. "Thank you, I will work hard, I promise." "I expect so." Mrs. Chen turned to Grant. "You staying for supper, if you are offering? Always am for you." She gave Katherine an appraising look. "Come on, girl, let me show you your room. You look like you are about to fall over." The room was small but clean, with a narrow bed, a washstand, and a window that looked out over the street. Katherine sank onto the bed, suddenly exhausted. Everything that had happened that day crashed over her at once. She had lost her family, her home, her entire life, but she was still here, still standing. There was a knock on the door frame. Grant stood there, hat in hand. "Just wanted to make sure you were settled." "I am." "Thank you, Mr. Townsend, for everything." "Grant is fine." He hesitated, then added, "I will be around town for a few days, buying horses to take up to Prescott if you need anything." "I will be fine." He nodded slowly, then put his hat back on. "I believe you will be." "You are stronger than you know, Katherine Tanner." The way he said her name sent warmth spreading through her chest. She watched him go, then lay back on the bed and stared at the ceiling. It had been the longest day of her life, but somehow she thought she might survive it after all. Over the next few days, Katherine threw herself into work. She rose before dawn to help Mrs. Chen prepare breakfast for the boarders, cleaned rooms until they gleamed, and spent her evenings mending linens by lamplight. The work was hard but honest, and she found satisfaction in it. Grant appeared regularly, always with some excuse. He needed to ask Mrs. Chen about a horse dealer. He wanted to discuss a business matter. He was checking on the boarding house's water pump. Katherine saw through the excuses, and her heart gave a little leap each time she heard his voice downstairs. On the third evening, she found him sitting on the front porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of crimson and gold. "Mind if I join you?" she asked. He patted the chair beside him. "I was hoping you would." They sat in companionable silence for a moment. The street was quiet, most folks settling in for the night. Somewhere a dog barked and music drifted faintly from the saloon. "I testified today," Katherine said quietly. "At the trial." Grant straightened. "How did it go?" "My father was there. He would not look at me." She swallowed hard. "But I told the truth, all of it. Samuel Morrison should go free. Papa and Uncle Robert will face charges for theft and false accusation." That took courage. It feels like betrayal. Truth is never betrayal. Your father betrayed himself when he chose dishonesty. Grant turned to face her fully. "Katherine, what you did matters. Maybe not just for Morrison, but for this whole territory. Too many powerful men think they can do whatever they want. You showed them different." "At what cost?" "At the cost of keeping your soul." His hand found hers on the armrest, warm and calloused. "That price is always worth paying." Katherine looked down at their joined hands, then up at his face. In the fading light, his features were softened, vulnerable. "Why do you care so much?" "About me, about this." "Because I know what it is like to lose everything for doing what is right." His voice was low, rough with old pain. "My family had a ranch in Texas. When I was 19, my father got involved with cattle rustlers. I turned him into the marshal. The ranch was confiscated, my father went to prison, and my mother—" He stopped, swallowed. "She could not forgive me, died 2 years later without ever speaking to me again." Grant. Her heart ached for him. "I spent years wondering if I did the right thing. Moved around, never staying anywhere long, trying to outrun the guilt. But I have come to realize something. The guilt would have been worse if I had stayed silent. At least this way I can look at myself in the mirror." Katherine squeezed his hand. "I am sorry you went through that. I am sorry you are going through it now. But Katherine, you are going to be all right, more than all right. You are going to build a life you can be proud of." She wanted to believe him. Sitting here with his hand in hers, the night air cooling her skin, she almost could. "Will you stay in Oro Blanco?" she asked. "I was planning to leave for Prescott tomorrow." Her heart sank, but she kept her voice steady. "Of course, your business. But I have been thinking." He turned her hand over, tracing the lines of her palm with his thumb. "There is good horse country around here, and the town is growing. Might be room for someone to set up a proper stable and trading post. You would stay, if I had a reason to." Their eyes met, and Katherine felt the world narrow to just the two of them. The connection between them was undeniable now, electric in the warm evening air. "Grant," she whispered. He leaned closer, and she met him halfway. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, then deepened into something that made her blood sing. His hand came up to cup her face, and she wound her fingers in his shirt, anchoring herself to this moment, this man, this unexpected promise of something beautiful rising from the ashes of her old life. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Grant rested his forehead against hers. "Tell me to stay, Katherine. Stay," she said without hesitation. "Please stay." "Then I will." The next weeks passed in a blur of work and stolen moments. Grant found a piece of land on the edge of town and began building his stable and corral. Katherine watched the structure take shape, often bringing him lunch and staying to help where she could. Their courtship was conducted in full view of the town, proper and public, but charged with an intensity that made her skin tingle every time he looked at her. Mrs. Chen approved. "That Townsend is a good man," she said one evening as they prepared dinner. "Honest, hard-working, the kind who will stand by you when times get tough." "I know," Katherine said, unable to keep the smile off her face. "Your father came by today." Katherine's hand stilled on the potatoes she was peeling. "What did he want? To convince me to fire you. Said you were a liar and a traitor." Mrs. Chen snorted. "I told him where he could put his opinions." Despite herself, Katherine laughed. "What did he say to that?" Turned red as a beet and stormed off. "You know the trial verdict came through. He and your uncle have to pay restitution to the Morrisons and serve 6 months in the territorial prison." Katherine set down her knife, her hands trembling. "I did that to him." "No, he did that to himself, Mrs. Chen's voice was firm. "You just refuse to help him avoid the consequences. There is a difference." In her head, Katherine knew that was true. In her heart, the guilt still gnawed at her. That evening she was unusually quiet, and Grant noticed immediately. "What is wrong?" he asked as they walked along the edge of town, the desert spreading vast and purple in the twilight. She told him about her father's visit, about the verdict, about the tangle of emotions choking her. Grant listened without interrupting, then pulled her close. "Katherine, your father made his choices. You made yours. You cannot carry his shame for him. He is still my father, and he will always be your father, but that does not mean you have to sacrifice yourself for his mistakes." He tilted her chin up, forcing her to meet his eyes. "You are allowed to move forward, to be happy, to build something good out of this." "I want to," she whispered. "I want to so much." "Then do it, with me." She buried her face in his chest, breathing in his scent, letting his solid presence anchor her. "I am afraid," she admitted, "of how much I feel for you. It is so fast, so intense." "I know, I feel it too." His voice rumbled in his chest beneath her ear. "But Katherine, I have spent years running from everything, never letting myself care too much. Then I saw you walking down that road, alone and defiant and so damn brave, and something in me just knew. You are what I have been looking for, the reason to stop running." She pulled back to look at him, her eyes searching his face. "You are sure, more sure than I have ever been of anything." He brushed a strand of hair from her face. "I love you, Katherine Tanner. I know it is fast, I know it is crazy, but it is true." Joy burst through her chest like fireworks. "I love you too." The kiss that followed was different from their first. It was a promise, a claiming, a declaration. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard, and Grant's eyes were dark with emotion. "Marry me," he said. "I know we have not known each other long, but I do not want to waste any more time." "Marry me, Katherine?" "Yes," she said without hesitation. "Yes, absolutely yes." They were married 3 weeks later in the small church at the end of town. Katherine wore a simple dress that Mrs. Chen had helped her sew, pale yellow cotton that brought out the gold in her hair. Grant wore his best suit, looking handsome and nervous and utterly perfect. Mrs. Chen stood as witness, along with Samuel Morrison, who had sought Katherine out to thank her personally for her courage. Her family did not attend. Katherine had sent word to her brother Thomas, but there had been no response. It hurt, that absence, but as she stood beside Grant and spoke her vows, she found she could bear it. This man beside her was her family now. They would build their own traditions, their own history. The reception was held at the boarding house, with half the town in attendance. People who had once shunned Katherine now came to congratulate her, to admire her strength, to welcome her properly into the community. It turned out that her father had not been as well liked as she thought. Many people were glad to see him taken down a peg, glad to see his daughter make her own way. As the evening wound down and guests began to drift home, Grant pulled Katherine aside. "Ready to see your wedding present?" "You got me a present. Our present, really. Come on." He led her through the darkening streets to the newly completed stable. But instead of stopping there, he guided her around back to a small house she had not noticed before. It was simple but well built, with a covered porch and windows that gleamed in the lamplight. "You built a house." Katherine stared in amazement. "I could not very well ask you to marry me without having a proper place for us to live." He scooped her up in his arms, making her squeal with surprise. "Let me carry my bride over the threshold." Inside, the house smelled of fresh wood and possibility. There was a main room with a stone fireplace, a kitchen area, and a bedroom beyond. The furniture was simple but sturdy, clearly made with care. A quilt in shades of blue and cream covered the bed, and curtains hung in the windows. "Grant, it is beautiful. It is ours." He set her down gently, his hands lingering at her waist. "A place to start fresh, to build our life together." Katherine turned in his arms, reaching up to frame his face with her hands. "I never imagined that day you found me on the road that I could end up so happy." "Neither did I." He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, the corner of her mouth. "But here we are." "Here we are," she echoed. And then there were no more words, only the two of them learning each other in the lamplight, sealing their vows in the most intimate way, building the foundation of their future with every touch, every whispered endearment, every expression of love. The months that followed were not without challenges. Grant's business started slowly, and there were weeks when money was tight. Katherine continued working at the boarding house to help make ends meet, though she cut back her hours as Grant's work picked up. Her father and uncle served their time in prison, and when they were released, they left Arizona entirely, reportedly heading to California. Thomas sent her a brief letter saying he had gone with them, but that he hoped she was well. The words were stilted and formal, but Katherine treasured them anyway. It was something. What surprised her most was how quickly Oro Blanco began to feel like home. She made friends among the townspeople, joined the church quilting circle, and became known as a woman of principle and kindness. People sought her advice, valued her opinion. She was no longer just the daughter of a disgraced rancher. She was Katherine Townsend, a person in her own right. Grant's reputation grew as well. He had an eye for good horses and dealt fairly with everyone, rancher and cowboy alike. The stable expanded, and he took on a young man named David to help with the work. Their house rang with laughter in the evenings, with the warmth of two people building a life together. A year after their marriage, Katherine woke one morning feeling nauseated. She knew immediately what it meant, and the knowledge filled her with equal parts joy and terror. That evening she told Grant over dinner, watching nervously for his reaction. He dropped his fork, his face going blank with shock. Then the biggest smile she had ever seen spread across his features. "A baby, we are having a baby, in about 6 months if my calculations are right." He was around the table in an instant, pulling her up into his arms and spinning her around. "Katherine, a baby." He set her down carefully, suddenly anxious. "Should I be spinning you around? Is that safe?" She laughed, the sound bright and free. "I am pregnant, not made of glass, still." He placed his hand reverently on her still flat stomach. "Our child is in there. That is a miracle." "It is," she agreed softly, covering his hand with hers. The pregnancy progressed smoothly, though the Arizona summer heat made the last months challenging. Mrs. Chen fussed over her like a mother hen, and Grant treated her as if she might break at any moment. Katherine found it both touching and exasperating. "I can still work," she protested when he tried to take over the dinner dishes for the 3rd night in a row. "I know you can, but you do not have to." He guided her to a chair. "Let me take care of you, Katherine, please." How could she argue with that? So she let him fuss, let him pamper, and found herself falling even more deeply in love with this good, honorable man who had appeared on the worst day of her life, and turned it into the beginning of something wonderful. Their son was born on a crisp October morning in 1883, with Mrs. Chen serving as midwife and Grant wearing a path in the floorboards outside the bedroom. When Mrs. Chen finally opened the door and told him he had a healthy boy, Grant nearly collapsed with relief. Katherine lay exhausted but radiant in the bed, their son cradled in her arms. He was tiny and red-faced and absolutely perfect, with a thatch of dark hair and his father's chin. "Meet your son," she said softly as Grant approached. He sank onto the edge of the bed, his hands trembling as he reached out to touch the baby's downy head. "He is so small. He will grow." "What should we name him?" They had discussed names for months but never settled on anything definite. Now, looking at this tiny person they had created, Katherine knew exactly what felt right. "Joseph," she said, "after my grandfather. He was the only one in my family who ever encouraged me to think for myself, to stand up for what was right." Grant's eyes were suspiciously bright. "Joseph Townsend, I like it." He leaned down to kiss her forehead. "Thank you." "For what?" "For this, for him. For choosing to love me even when it would have been easier to give up on everything. Loving you has never been hard, Grant. It is the easiest thing I have ever done." They sat together like that, the three of them, as the morning sun streamed through the window and lit their small family with golden light. Katherine thought about that desperate, broken girl walking down a dusty road just over a year ago, and marveled at how far she had come. How much she had gained by refusing to compromise her principles. Grant had been right. Honesty was worth more than gold. It had cost her one family but given her another, better one. It had cost her a life of comfort but given her a life of meaning. She had no regrets. Joseph proved to be a good baby, healthy and curious. As he grew, his personality emerged, a delightful combination of his parents' best traits. He had his mother's stubbornness and his father's steady temperament, and he was absolutely fearless, constantly getting into everything. The stable business continued to thrive. Grant's reputation spread beyond Oro Blanco, and soon he was traveling regularly to ranches throughout the territory, buying and selling horses, building relationships. Katherine managed the books and the day-to-day operations when he was gone, proving herself just as capable in business as in everything else. When Joseph was 2, Katherine discovered she was pregnant again. This time the news came with less surprise but equal joy. Their daughter, Ruth, was born in the spring of 1886, red-haired like Katherine's mother had been, with a temper to match. She kept them all on their toes from the beginning, a tiny hurricane of energy and opinions. "Where does she get that stubborn streak from?" Grant asked one evening as they finally got their overtired daughter to sleep after an hour of protests. Katherine gave him a look. "Have you met us?" he laughed, pulling her close. "Fair point. We do not exactly have calm, biddable personalities." "No, we do not." She leaned into him, content. "But we have built something good here, something real. We have." He kissed the top of her head. "And it all started because you had the courage to tell the truth, no matter the cost." Sometimes Katherine still thought about her family, wondered how they were doing in California, whether Thomas ever thought of her. She had heard through the grapevine that her father had started over, working as a foreman on someone else's ranch. Part of her hoped he had learned from his mistakes, become a better man. Another part of her had made peace with the possibility that he had not. Either way, it no longer had the power to hurt her the way it once had. She had her own family now, her own legacy to build. Joseph and Ruth would grow up knowing that honesty and integrity mattered more than wealth or status. They would see their parents treat people fairly, keep their word, stand up for what was right. On their 5th anniversary, Grant surprised her with a trip to Tucson, leaving the children with Mrs. Chen for a long weekend. They stayed in a fine hotel, ate at restaurants, and walked through the growing city like tourists. But Katherine found herself eager to get back to Oro Blanco, to their little house and their children and their simple life. "You ever regret it?" Grant asked as they sat on the hotel balcony their last evening, watching the sun set over the mountains. "Giving up your father's ranch, all that wealth and status for this?" Katherine thought about it seriously, then shook her head. "Never. That life was built on lies and intimidation. This life is built on truth and love. There is no comparison. Even when money is tight and the work is hard, especially then." She took his hand, threading their fingers together. "I would rather struggle alongside you than live in luxury based on dishonesty. What we have is real, Grant. It is ours. No one can take it away because we did not steal it or lie for it. We earned it." He brought her hand to his lips, kissing her knuckles. "I fall more in love with you every single day. Good, because you are stuck with me. Exactly where I want to be." They returned home to find Joseph had learned a new word in their absence and was using it constantly, much to Mrs. Chen's exasperation, and Ruth had taken her first steps. Katherine gathered her children close, breathing in their little person smell, feeling her heart expand with gratitude. The years continued to roll by, each one bringing its own joys and challenges. Joseph started school and showed an aptitude for numbers that reminded Katherine of herself. Ruth proved to have her father's way with animals, spending hours in the stable brushing horses and talking to them in her high, sweet voice. Grant expanded the business again, building a proper smithy where he could shoe horses and do metalwork. Katherine took over the books for several other businesses in town, earning her own income and gaining even more respect in the community. In 1890, when Joseph was 7 and Ruth was 4, Katherine received an unexpected letter. It was from Thomas, her brother, now 21 years old. He was living in San Francisco, working as a clerk, and he wanted to reconnect. The letter was apologetic and tentative, explaining that he had always regretted not standing up for her, that he had been too young and too afraid to go against their father. Katherine cried when she read it, and Grant held her as she worked through the complicated tangle of emotions. Anger at being abandoned, relief that he was well, joy at the possibility of reconciliation, grief for the years they had lost. "What do you want to do?" Grant asked. "I want to write back," she said. "I want my brother in my life if he truly wants to be there. Then do it." The correspondence that followed was cautious at first, both of them testing the waters, but gradually their relationship rebuilt. Thomas sent gifts for the children at Christmas. Katherine shared stories about her life in Oro Blanco, and eventually they made plans for him to visit. When Thomas arrived in the summer of 1891, Katherine barely recognized him. The gangly teenager had become a man, tall and broad-shouldered, with the same dark hair and blue eyes she saw in the mirror every day. They stood facing each other on the porch for a long moment, years of separation between them. Then Thomas said, "I am sorry, Katherine. I should have stood with you." And Katherine opened her arms, letting her little brother step into her embrace. "You are here now. That is what matters." Thomas stayed for 2 weeks, and by the time he left, he had fallen in love with Oro Blanco. Within 6 months, he had moved there permanently, taking a job keeping books for the general store. It felt like a circle closing or perhaps opening, Katherine thought. Her family was not the one she had been born into, but it was the one she had chosen and built. Grant, Joseph, Ruth, Thomas, Mrs. Chen, even young David who worked in the stable. They were all her family now. One evening, as Katherine and Grant sat on their porch watching Joseph teach Ruth how to skip rocks in a water barrel, She reflected on the journey that had brought her here. 9 years ago, she had lost everything for the sake of truth. Now she had everything that truly mattered. "What are you thinking about?" Grant asked, always attuned to her moods. "About that day on the road when you stopped for me. Best decision I ever made. Mine too." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "You told me honesty was worth more than gold. I did not entirely believe you then. I thought it was just something people said to make themselves feel better about sacrifice. And now I know you were right. The life we have built, the love we share, the respect we have earned, none of that would exist if it was not built on a foundation of truth. I would not trade this for anything." He wrapped his arm around her shoulders, pulling her close. "Neither would I." As the sun set over the Arizona desert, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and purple, Katherine felt a peace settle over her that went bone deep. She had been cast out for refusing to lie, had lost everything she thought defined her. But in losing that, she had found something infinitely more valuable. She had found herself, her integrity intact. She had found true love with a man who valued honor above convenience. She had found a home where she belonged, not because of her family name or wealth, but because of who she was as a person. The path had been hard. There had been days when she thought she could not go on, nights when she had cried herself to sleep mourning all she had lost. But Grant had been right there beside her, reminding her of her strength, believing in her when she struggled to believe in herself. As the children's laughter rang out in the warm evening air, Katherine allowed herself to feel the full weight of her happiness. She had 2 beautiful, healthy children who would grow up knowing their parents' love was built on mutual respect and shared values. She had work that challenged and fulfilled her. She had friends who valued her. She had a brother return to her. And most of all, she had Grant, her partner in every sense of the word. The man who had looked at a dusty, desperate woman on a lonely road and seen someone worth stopping for. In the years that followed, their family continued to grow and thrive. Joseph eventually took over the stable business, proving to have inherited his father's eye for good horses. Ruth surprised everyone by becoming a teacher, her natural authority and fierce intelligence serving her well in the classroom. Thomas married a widow with 2 children of her own, expanding the family further. Grant and Katherine grew old together, their love deepening with each passing year. They weathered droughts and economic downturns, celebrations and sorrows, always together, always honest with each other. On their 25th wedding anniversary, surrounded by children and grandchildren, Grant stood to make a toast. "25 years ago, I met a woman walking down a dusty road in the middle of nowhere. She had nothing but the clothes on her back and her principles, which had just cost her everything she knew. I offered her water and a ride, and she changed my life." He looked at Katherine, his eyes still holding that same warmth that had drawn her from the beginning. "Katherine, you taught me that courage is not the absence of fear, but the willingness to do what is right despite the fear. You showed me what it means to live with integrity, and you gave me a life richer than any amount of gold could ever buy." Katherine rose to stand beside him, her eyes misty. "You told me once that honesty is worth more than gold. I have spent 25 years proving you right, and I will spend the rest of my life grateful that you stopped on that road, that you saw value in me when I had nothing material to offer." They kissed as their family applauded, and in that moment, Katherine knew with absolute certainty that she would not change a single thing about her journey. The pain of being cast out had been real, but it had led her to this, to a life built on truth and love and the unwavering support of a good man. Years later, when Katherine was in her 60s and her hair had gone silver, a young woman came to her seeking advice. The woman was in a similar situation, being pressured by family to stay silent about something she knew was wrong. Katherine invited her to sit on the porch, the same porch where she and Grant had spent countless evenings, and shared her story. "I will not lie and say it will be easy," Katherine told her. "Standing up for truth often comes at a cost, but I will tell you this: the cost of lying to yourself, of compromising your integrity, is higher. It might not seem like it in the moment, but it is." "How do you know?" Katherine gestured to the life around her, the stable where her son worked, the house full of love and memories, the town where she was respected and valued. "Because I paid the price for honesty, and look what I gained. A life I am proud of, love that has lasted. Children and grandchildren who know what it means to stand for something. If I had lied, I might still have wealth and status, but I would have lost myself. And I would never have found this." The young woman left with tears in her eyes but determination in her set of her shoulders. Katherine never knew if she followed through, but she hoped she had planted a seed. Grant found her still sitting on the porch as the afternoon faded into evening. His hair was white now, and his movements a bit slower, but his eyes still lit up when he looked at her. "Still changing the world one conversation at a time?" he asked, settling into the chair beside her, trying to. "Was it worth it, Grant? All of it?" He took her hand, his grip still strong despite the years. "Every single second. You are my world, Katherine Townsend. You always have been. And you are mine." They sat together as the desert sunset painted the sky in fire, two people who had found each other in the most unlikely circumstances and built something beautiful. Katherine thought about that desperate girl on the dusty road and sent her a message across the years. It gets better. You survive. You thrive. The truth sets you free. When Grant passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 72, Katherine grieved deeply but without regrets. They had been given 46 years together, every one of them earned through mutual respect and unwavering honesty. She continued living in their house, surrounded by the life they had built, visited regularly by children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren who all knew the story of how their family began. Katherine herself lived to be 81, sharp-minded and strong-willed until the end. On her final day, surrounded by family, she smiled and said, "Honesty is worth more than gold. Remember that." And they did. The story of Katherine and Grant Townsend became part of Oro Blanco's history, a reminder that integrity has its own rewards, that love built on truth lasts, and that sometimes losing everything leads you to find what truly matters. Their great-granddaughter eventually wrote it all down, preserving the tale for future generations, ensuring that the lesson lived on. Stand for what is right, even when it costs you everything, because what you gain in return is worth more than you can imagine.